To understand the fractures in Syria, we need to go back more than 100 years to the Ottoman rule and beyond. But in this video, we are going to talk about how Syria became what is today. Therefore, we will not go back to the Ottomans. We will focus more on the adventure of the Baath party and the Assad family. Our calendar starts on March 8, 1963. The Baath party came to power in Syria through a military coup. The party ostensibly advocated pan-Arabism and socialism. It did not seem to have direct ties to any sect. There was a serious competition within the party. Factions at the head of the regime tried to eliminate each other. 7 years passed. Hafez al-Assad, who had been the Minister of Defense and had dominated the army, seized power in Syria after what looked more like a coup than a coup. Hafez was different from his rivals like Salah Jadid. He organized well on the basis of sectarianism. Perhaps this is exactly where it all began. Over time, all the country's economic resources were tied to Damascus. The Baath party benefited from all of Syria's wealth. The Baath party came to power at a time when the cracks in Syria were deepening. There was a sociological crisis in the country. The society was divided according to nationalities and sects. On the one hand, there were Kurds who were not even given identity cards and whose language was banned. In 1962, the Arab Belt policy was launched in the Kurdish populated region of Jazeera. The policy aimed to change the demographic composition of the Kurdish population in order to transfer Kurdish lands to the Arabs. This resulted in the disposition forced migration of Kurds. In a census conducted in 962, the citizenship of about 150,000 Kurds was revoked. They were registered as unregistered, and this resulted in their being deprived of their basic rights. Kurdish were denied access to healthcare, education, and government jobs. Under the Baath regime, restrictions of Kurdish language and culture increased. The use of Kurdish names, education in the Kurdish language, and freedom of cultural expression were severely restricted. The Baath regime had two options: democracy or war. The Baath regime never cared about the demands of the people living in the country except for the elites. On the other side were Sunni Muslims, who had been marginalized throughout modern Syrian history. Sunnis make up more than 70% of Syrian society. Sunnis, like Kurds, systematically oppressed over the years under the Baath regime. Sunnis were not employed in the public services. They were not allowed in the army either. This policy of operation, concerted of two groups, had already divided Syria into three in parts. Both Sunni Muslims and Kurds attempted to revolt against this operation. In order to defend against this situation in Syria, the Muslim Brotherhood was reactivated in Syria in 964. This provided a platform for the Sunnis to voice their religious and political demands. Anyone who rebelled in Syria was immediately crushed. In 973, a rebellion launched by groups affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood in Homs was quickly suppressed by the regime. During this period, the Muslim Brotherhood and other Sunni groups were most engaged in covert resistance and propaganda activities. Armed actions were very rare. The Baath regime always ignored these demands. It always belittled the Sunni communities and the Kurds and sold the rights it was supposed to give them as concessions of the enemy, a truly paranoid and fascist regime. In the 980s, the rebellions had already begun. Sunni Muslims who had been oppressed and marginalized for more than 20 years began to rise up. There were many reasons for this. The Iranian Islamic Revolution was a source of inspiration for Muslims, but this was not only the reason. The Muslim Brotherhood was at the center of the uprising in the 80s. In the 80s, they raised the flag of rebellion in Aleppo. The Baath response was harsh. Hundreds of Muslims lost their lives. The city of Hama was a stronghold of the Muslim Brotherhood, and there was strong opposition of the Baath regime there. In the year 982, a great massacre took place in Hama. The Baath regime killed between 10,000 and 40,000 people. This was a great massacre. The Muslim Brotherhood protests were also intense in Homs. In the late 70s and early 80s, there were many anti-Baath demonstrations in this city. All of them were suppressed with bloodshed. In the 90s, Hafiz al-Assad had the idea of handing over this unshakable kingdom of Damascus to his son, Bashar al-Assad. Bashar was rising rapidly through the ranks of the army. He was also becoming a public figure, making speeching and campaigning. But Bashar died in a car crash in 1994. Bashar, Hafiz's younger son, left his ophthalmologist's position in England and immediately returned to Syria. Bashar's son received military training and rose through the ranks. Before his death, Hafiz al-Assad prepared his son to take over power.
That he can listen to all of us in the car for 3 hours.
Listen to the music.
So there are 3.
In 2000, after the death of the Hafiz al-Assad, the minimum age to become president was lowered constitutional amendment from 40 to 34 so that Bashar al-Assad could run for president. Assad inherited his father's kingdom. He enjoyed it for more than a decade, but it could not last much longer. By 2010, Bashar was already feeling the warm winds of the Arab Spring. In Tunisia, in December of 2010, a young peddler named Mohamed Bazouzi set himself on fire because his fruit and vegetable stall, his livelihood, had been confiscated and he was being mistreated. The flames from Bazouzi's body completely changed the region. Many governments were overthrown, many were shaken. The Arab Spring had begun, millions of people soon took to the streets. Protests began and the movement spread from Tunisia to Egypt, Libya, Syria and other Arab countries. These events marked the beginning of a period in which the people were more vocal in their demands for change and mobilized against authoritarian regimes. While some countries learned from this wave of protests, the Assad regime did the opposite. It responded to the protest with harshness and there were many bloody incidents. The regime's abnormal structure was not conducive to meeting the demands of the people. Each concession brought other concessions. Bashar therefore resorted to as much violence as possible, arbitrary detentions, extrajudicial killings, disappearances. After 2020, Syria was never the same. Bashar al-Assad's rule was believed to be stable until the Arab Spring. The regime created paramilitary groups such as the National Defense Militia and the Shibiha, which have been involved in numerous acts of violence against civilians. The actions of these groups will not be forgotten in Syria, perhaps for generations. The Assad regime's only perspective responding to these events has been the survival of the regime. Despite nominal steps towards reform, such as the constitutional referendum in 2012, these were largely superficial. The Baath party continued to dominate the political landscape with no real intention of sharing power or truly democratizing the system. The Baath regime, as I said in the video, was a stillborn regime. Iran and Russia kept this death regime alive 4 years for their own interests. In late 2014, the Assad regime was at its worst. The cracks in the hearts of the people in the country had turned into concrete borders, and there was a lot of pressure from Western countries. The whole world was talking about Assad's last days, until the Russian invasion began. In 2014, Russia annexed Crimea and a year later turned its eyes to the Syrian front. The fall of Assad meant the weakening of Iran and Russia in the region. Therefore, the two countries supported the bloody regime. Within 1-2 years, Wagner forces were displayed in many parts of Syria. There were Russian mercenaries in critical cities like Homs, Damascus, and Deir ez-Zor. On the other hand, Iran entered the region with the Jerusalem force of the Revolutionary Guards and other paramilitary forces. In the north, there was the US-backed VPG. Although the Baathist regime has remained in power Syria for 61 years and has been characterized by oppression and cruelty, it is in fact a long-death regime. Without the military and diplomatic support of Iran and Russia, this regime would have not survived. However, this external support has led to a great tragedy for the Syrian people. Millions have lost their lives and millions more have been forced to fly their homes. In the process, Syrians in search of freedom and justice have become the playthings of foreign powers in their own land. The end of the Baathist regime will go down in history as a shame not only for Syria, but for the whole world, because humanity has turned a blind eye to the suffering of millions for the sake of its own interests. This documentary exposes not only the atrocities of a regime, but also the silence of complicity of the international community.